one of the things that separates Los Angeles from New York, London, Southeast Asia is probably like visionaries, is people whose specialty is like seeing something in 5 years that doesn't exist today. I think that that's one of the gifts that this city offers. It's the place where visionaries come to. I don't think it's even the place where dreams come true. I think it's the place where like dreams are created, because this is not the place where dreams come true. Absolutely not.
Sponsored by Allfeet, decentralized blockchain solutions for the music industry. Produced by Amplitude Ventures Consulting, partners in early stage music tech. Today we've got a really special episode. I'm sitting down with Jace and Chris, two people I've been lucky enough to know for years. We talk about their wild journey through the music industry. From grinding it out in LA to launching their own company, we're talking about what it really takes to build something meaningful in music. Let's jump in. All right, guys, welcome back to the Sound Connections podcast. Today, I have a quite special episode. John, Samuel, and Chris, welcome to the studio.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Well, I guess JS is in the studio. Chris here in the mountains, but looks amazing.
Yeah.
This is special because we had some common story together, and I've known you guys for, I would say, 6-ish years, maybe. I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And we met in LA and sort of took off creative journeys together to some degree. And now 6 years later, you guys are working together and have quite a phenomenal trajectory to your journey. And the purpose of this episode is really understanding the music industry from its core, creating music, managing creators of music, and really the ups and downs of that. I've sort of been on the sidelines following it, and it's been quite amazing to follow, but I'm very sure there's been ups and downs. But just for the people who don't know you, Chris and Samuel, can you just describe each of you who you are and what you do?
Yeah, Chris, why don't you start us off? I want to know
Yeah.
who you are.
So I manage John Samuel, and I met John Samuel through Jacob in a session, which is funny. At the time, I was pursuing music. I had no desire to be on the music business side, but I met Jacob, and he was talking about his company Mantic and about his music publishing. And after the session, I said, "What is music publishing? Let's get a beer." We started talking, and I found it really interesting. And at this point, I was already in a band for years and producing for years, and nothing was really where I wanted it to be. So I figured it might be a good time to change. So that, just hearing Jacob talk about what music publishing is, like, really intrigued me. And then that's kind of how the journey started with John Sam, because he was with Mantic. But so I've been managing him for the past 4 or 5 years, something like that. And then John Samuel, me, and our other partner started a company recently, which is also really exciting, which we'll dive into. But yeah, that's the footnotes of me.
Yeah. I'm from South Africa originally. I was born in Johannesburg, and then I spent my like high school years. I went to high school in Zimbabwe. And like both areas are quite peculiar places to like have a desire to become a like predominant part of the music industry. I think for me, I was really influenced by this like online movement that was happening primarily on YouTube. These like 2013 Tumblr bands were transitioning more into like long form video content as greater expressions of what their bands and what their artistry was. And so what that did is it created this whole new reach, so that like teenagers in Zimbabwe could like watch 21 Pilots full 2-hour set, could watch the 1975 play Madison, could play the O2, could watch like The Neighborhood do a full set, and understand that like music is something so much bigger than CDs, so much bigger than streaming, so much bigger. It's like, this is like a real thing. Like, they didn't even have to come to me for me to see this stuff is like real and it's important, it's human, and it's cool. And for some reason, like, I see myself in there. And so what that led to me is like, I'm a really obsessive person. for a while, I thought that was not a good thing about me, and then I decided to twist it, and I was like, this is the best thing about me, is how deep I want to go into everything I'm interested in. And I like found out how consistent the artists that I liked were also their own producers, or at least involved in their own production. It was like a 1-to-1 ratio for me.
Yeah.
And so I went on like my own quest at like 16 to become a music professional. That was like my goal the whole time. I wanted to become a professional inside of music. And so that led me to Cape Town for a little while. I was going to go to London, and that kind of fell through, which led me to LA. I moved to LA when I was 18 to work for this guy, Larry Getz, an absolute engineering music legend. And the reason why I was just down to absolutely make that happen is because I like knew he was a pro. I knew he knew things. I knew he had so much confidence that he was almost cynical about it. And I wanted that. I wanted someone who was like tired and angry to teach me. And and I like lied about living in LA to get the job. I was like, yeah, dude, I already live there, man. I'm just tearing it up in Hollywood. You know me. And he was like, cool, like let's meet in like a couple weeks. And I was like, sounds good, man. And so I moved to LA as fast as I could so I could meet with him and like beg to be his assistant for free and work as much as he could possibly give me at that studio. And so
Mm.
that's how I got to LA, is just this like there's no such thing as a no type of answer, pursuit of becoming a music professional, um, being a part of this like movement that found me through like YouTube.
Mm.
Um, Yeah, and then through that, like, I was just like, "Okay, well, being an artist is like my music isn't good enough to make any money yet, but I love it, so I need to do some stuff," and I was just meeting everybody music related and just giving my everything, and that eventually led me to Jacob, or Jakob as they call him in Europe, and, Jacob was like we did a session, and it was cool, it was weird. Afterwards, I did my grand reveal that I was like 2 years old. I was 19, but still. And that like kind of changed everything, and then from there we started like working together a lot because Jacob loves opportunities and I love taking opportunities. And so and then that introduced me to Chris and to a bunch of other like incredible collaborators through Jacob and what you were doing. And that I consider was like the beginning of like my music industry like quest, if
Mm.
yeah, sure.
Mm.
So that's what got
Amazing.
me
Well,
there, and that's what got me to meet you all.
amazing, and I'm very excited to sort of see that this is taking off now, and we'll get to that in a moment. But one thing I think is really interesting is you painted the picture of the grind of being in LA and basically begging to work. You know that wouldn't happen in that that many other industries.
Yeah.
Um, is actually my only reflection upon LA because I'm going to move there at one point. But one of the things that really struck me about LA, and Chris would know this because he's a native, is that the amount of realism or the opposite in that city is just immense because you need to just somehow process and handle the sheer amount of devastation it means to actually live there and try to make it. And I think for me, that was when I saw this and I saw you, JS, and I was very much looking up to your spirit. Like, that's not for me. Like, not right now. Like, I'm gonna get there some other path, and that's sort of where I'm sort of building towards it in a much slower way than most people do. And it's not because LA for me is like the place. I just believe there's something very special about that city, and you guys can probably witness that and talk a bit about it. But so to some degree, JS, you had a let's call it traditional struggle into music, which is kind of sad to say that, but that's yeah. But maybe just you can talk about sort of your colleagues and your friends. Like it seems like that is the usual ish way to sort of struggle away into that career.
Yeah, I think I think one of the one of the things that separates a music hub like Los Angeles from New York, from London, from Southeast Asia, is that like LA is probably what it attracts the most is probably like visionaries, is people whose specialty is like seeing something in 5 years that doesn't exist today. I really like I think that that's one of the gifts that this city like offers. Is it like really it's the place where visionaries come to, you know? I don't think it's even the place where dreams come true. I think it's the place where like dreams like are created.
Mm.
Because this is not the place where dreams come true. Absolutely not. I
No.
think and so as a result, if this is the place where like people who dream come to, then you're going to have a lot of um potentially, I guess, vulnerable people working as hard as they can towards something that the only proof of is in their brains, is
Mm.
in their head, is this vision that they have. And I've like, especially the friends that I like hold close to right now are all people who had their own visions and like experienced the realist, um, smart people around them saying, "This is ridiculous. You're gonna lose all your money. You are like, this is a bad idea for you."
Mm.
And them saying, "I don't care. Like,
Mm.
this, like, it's not living if it's not radical."
Mm.
And that's like, that is something that inspires me so much more than the concept of making it or the concept of like a arbitrary success
Mm.
is
Mm.
like the idea of like a powerful radical life inside of the arts. I
Mm.
think that's the thing that drives people deep down, whether they know it or not, is that
Mm.
like, and I think that's what keeps people here because
Mm.
this is not a city that by any means that you would particularly want to put down roots in. But what I think it offers is I think it offers musicians, creatives, and writers, and a lot of forms of people inside of entertainment. It
Mm.
provides them a place where there's not like a ceiling. It provides them a place where you are encouraged to dream really big, where you're encouraged to start something that's going to take you 5 years. You're encouraged to be like so unrealistic,
Mm.
and just understanding that the person who is capable of fulfilling that dream is not you today. It'll probably be you in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years, but you'll have to become them, and I
Mm.
think that that's so cool. Where else in the world does that exist? I have
Mm.
found nowhere else. I think it's
Yeah.
It's
only here.
You know what's funny? I have like such a different experience because I'm from LA, and I feel like I never really grew up in a creative capacity. I feel like that kind of happened later in my life. So hearing Jace talk about this, I obviously agree now that I've been in it for a while, but doing the band thing and like I never really saw it as that because that's all I've known. So I'm like, oh yeah, LA's cool. Like, but I think if I were to have moved to LA from somewhere else to pursue it, I don't think I would have had what it takes to like really give everything. Cause at the end of the day, like I'm from here. So if the band didn't work out, I'm still in LA. My home's here. But it's funny that it took me years and years, like years and years after doing the band thing, and since I started managing Jace, to see that what you're saying is so true. And now I'm like, oh my God, that's so true. But I didn't see that at all growing up. That never crossed my mind, which
I
is
mean, yeah,
funny.
it's the materialization of the invisible. Of
Yeah,
course, you can't see it because not even the people doing it can see it, really.
it's weird.
But, Chris, I'm gonna ask you since you're sort of a manager, I think, Jay said something about making it, and, I know that's all relative, but, like, I would say in pretty much objective terms, you guys, the point 1 percentile, success when you stories, when it comes to LA and sort of the journey you've been on. But Chris, just to set the scene, sort of where are you guys right now in your careers? What are you seeing happening?
It's funny. Jason and I have conversations about this like daily. And it's it's interesting that when you sit down and think about where you're at, like you see where you're at right now, and you kind of forget about the past 2 years. So I'm only focused on right now, and like I feel like it's always like we're always trying to push, like, okay, we gotta go further, we gotta go further. But when I sit and think about right where we started to where we are now, that's a pretty big feat. Like, we don't have any songs on Billboard 100 right now, but just knowing that we've stuck together and we've been building this thing, and now these conversations with bigger sessions are more normal, or like we'll have a meeting at a label, and like what would have scared the crap out of me 2 years ago, like shivering to go in there, now it's just like, oh, it's cool. But like
Right,
it's
and we, like,
it's
know people at that label. Like, we
and
walk in and
it's
we recognize, like, 3 people.
yeah, and it's so easy to lose sight of all that. But like, so it's interesting to talk about this and like kind of really sit down and think about the past. um I don't think it answered your question at all.
No, it's like, but it does to some degree because, in my own words, you guys are releasing music with pretty big artists. You have big representation and association with major global well-known players, and um, I think that in itself is a success story in sort of the competitive environment you're in. Um, and what I think is interesting in that is like the struggle to get there. Like, uh, one thing I remembered, I think that was probably a couple of years ago or so, where with Jason Chris, he announced that JCU got signed to Simon Cowell, and sort of that
Yeah, shout
collaboration,
out.
which in most public perception is like the epitome of like entertainment. Um, could you tell me a bit how that sort of came about? Like, when did Simon hear your music, and what happened there? Because that's obviously not a made it moment that it needs to come into realization with a lot of things, but like there was definitely a pretty big statement on sort of where your career is going.
Yeah, yeah. I kinda I do wanna tag Chris in this story, like, but I'll start at least with part of my perspective of it. I think this is, like, a very clear, just global example of, like, y give your best to everything when no one is watching, because more people are watching than you think.
Mm,
Like, I was not making music with the perspective of, like, top music executives are gonna be hearing this and are gonna be considering, wanting to own this, wanting to have a piece of it, wanting to invest in it. So, I was just making stuff that I like. I had to consistently come back to why to make music, why to do things at a high level, why to push yourself, and why to get better. Like, it was important for me to ground myself in why I moved to LA, why I came here, was to become a professional because I wanna do things, I wanna change things, I wanna be a part of a movement, I wanna be a part of a voice, of a story, and so I was making music, and I still am making music from a place of, like, something important will happen through me, around me, and my music is gonna be my reflection of that. I've only experienced songs to change my life, and, and through that, like, someone like a Simon Cowell heard the music and liked it, like, and I never met him. The only association was gonna be through the story that Chris is gonna tell, but
yeah.
the way my feeling through it is really, like, this is a very clear story of, like, you don't know who's listening, so, like,
Mm,
work, act, be the person that everyone's listening to, you know?
mm, mm,
Assume that into yourself, and, like, you've no idea what's just gonna come out of nowhere. You've no
mhm.
idea. I'm tapping Chris in now.
Yeah. No, I actually completely agree with Jason. I've seen it on this whole journey. Like, even if he's doing a song with a really small artist, he's made a comment one time, like, you know what, like, I'm gonna treat it as if this was a Dua Lipa song, and I'm gonna give it everything as if it was Dua Lipa. And I thought that, like, that's resonated with me so much because I'm like, on, we're all humans. So if it's like
Shout out
an
Dua Lipa.
artist, if it's like an artist that, you're like, I don't really want to be doing this, but he always gives his all 100% of the time, maybe to a fault sometimes. Where I'm like, all right, man, like, you know, you gotta relax a bit. Um, but on that. So he was working at his craft for every day when he was in LA. We met, um, and full disclosure, my wife used to be Simon's executive assistant, which sounds like, oh, well, that's an easy shoe in. And like, I can tell you right now, that is not the case whatsoever. Honestly, if anything, it makes it a little harder. Um, so the direct connection was from that, but it wasn't like, hey, uh, Taylor, go show Simon this song and get him signed. Like, I, that couldn't have been any more opposite ever. Um, and it was like a very slow burn, and like just waiting for Jace to, hone in on his skills and hone in on this and that, to the point where we felt like, all right, these songs are like really good, to the point where we would feel comfortable having like someone like a Simon listening to it. And so when the time was right, he heard the songs and he was intrigued by it, and said, "Oh, who is this?" And then, the conversation happened, and then he's like, "Oh, I want to meet him." So then we had a meeting with him, and yeah, obviously, my wife being in the inside definitely helped, but like really what sold it was when Simon met Jace. We had like a little meeting, and like Jace is so young and so youthful and like so green, like in a good way. Like he's not like the cynical, jaded, bitter producer. He's just happy to be doing music, and like you can't fake that. And Simon, I think, picked up on that in our first meeting. It was just like, I love this energy, because Jacob, I'm sure you know too, but like, um, it's so easy to become cynical and just kind of jaded and just like, F this is miserable. And there's something so beautiful about keeping the innocence of making music and keeping it fun,
Right.
which we found is kind of hard. It's kind of a rare thing, which I didn't really know. Uh, so that's how the whole Simon thing came up. And then he obviously liked what he heard. And then we didn't sign right away. There were still a couple months of like, okay, we're showing him more songs and more songs. And then it got to the point, okay, like he wanted to start a publishing company. He had another artist signed. And then it was kind of made sense to like, okay, let's explore signing a producer writer, because he's never signed a producer writer. It was artist on the label side. So it's kind of just a new endeavor for all parties, which made it really cool, because there was no blueprint. There was no like, oh, this is what you do now. And we've just been building together since.
Yeah. And it's quite beautiful, like, to be honest. And the way that I sort of see you guys' dynamics, at least, back then, maybe still now, is that Chris, maybe because you never really bought into that hype culture. And I'm not saying Chase is, but like there's fundamental differences between like projecting energy into the universe and then also withholding it. And I
Yeah.
think that at least how I perceive it, I think that's really been both of you guys' benefit, that there's a way to fully understand the career that Chase is on, because Chris, you've literally been there for like day one.
Yeah.
And still sort of being able to have that calmness, but also understand sort of the full scope of the journey. I think that's quite unique story, to be honest.
What
Yeah.
I think, we've talked about this before, but I think one of like the best assets I had and Jace had respectively was like the lack of knowledge. I never had managed. I didn't know what music publishing was. I didn't know literally anything, for better or worse. And like, so it's not like I uh, started working at a management company and they said, okay, this is what you do. Here's the template. Here's that. Like, literally, I can't tell you. It was all trial and error. And some of it was probably terrible. Some of it was probably unorthodox. Some of it probably helped make me into like this, my style, I guess,
Mm,
because I had no frame of reference whatsoever. I was just like,
mm.
I think this might work. Let's try it. And then sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
And I honestly prefer that. I think it aligns with how I have always approached music too. Like I approach a lot of things in my life as if you find the right people, you can teach anyone skills.
Mm.
And like I'm not saying I taught Chris anything. Chris is completely self-taught and it's beautiful and he's an artist in his own way. But like it's it has proven true to me more and more and more that like
Mm.
anyone can learn anything. I feel that way by myself. I can learn absolutely anything. It's the person that matters more than the things.
Mm,
And so I'm so much more, I'm so grateful that like the like day to day big picture and small picture player that I'm working with is someone who has that belief about themselves, that they can learn
totally.
anything, that you
Yeah.
don't need years and years of experience in management to be creative with it, to be smart with it, to strategize.
Mm,
Like, why? Why do you need that kind of validation? It's
mm,
like it's like needing a job to get experience, but you need experience to get the job. It's like just
mm.
start it yourself.
And
But
what
Get your
was
experience and watch your perspective of what managing
mm,
is. Change what management is. Like you'll change the landscape just by being someone who's freestyling.
but also I
mm,
think what's great is that Jace had no percep perspective of what a manager does or doesn't do. Like, I'm sure you had an idea, right? Like, also, I had no idea what a manager does and doesn't
Nah,
do.
I really didn't care. I was like, just help
But
me, man.
that's honestly, that was the most, freeing part was just like, I don't know, like, let's try to do something. Like, because if Jace had, like, a string of managers prior, there's so much, it's so easy to like, "Oh, well, this one did this and this one did that," and you're constantly comparing and contrasting and maybe losing sight of what this new thing could be. But because we had literally no frame of reference, I think that was the best thing that ever could have happened
mm,
for
mm.
this.
And what I think is really interesting about you guys is I'm gonna say that with honesty, like I have never met more hungry and humble students in my life of music. You know,
It's nice.
but I
Thank
mean
you.
it, and I think that's also why it's so interesting for me to sort of circle back to talk with you guys is I can't remember the exact sort of statements of it, but as far as I know, JS, when we had our first session, as far as I remember, that was like your first co-writing session in like a pop context. Like
I think so. I think it was. Let's say it was for the sake of the story.
at least one of the first. I just remember like you really didn't have any idea to be honest.
Yeah.
And it was a really fun session. I was really impressed, but like you were fucking lost behind that computer, that's for sure. I like in how to interact as a session.
No, I agree with
Mm,
you. I agree with
Yeah,
you. Don't try to justify it.
yeah. And Chris, you literally had no clue whatsoever about music. Like when it comes to the industry, like.
No.
But what was so interesting is um I think in some degree I was like in a mentor-ish position by that time. Not that I knew anything, it's just I just knew a tiny bit more than you guys. But the sheer amount of listening you did to the small things I had to say and like trying absolutely everything and everything I threw at you guys, you both took it in. I think that's also what I'm sensing now. Of course, you guys are more selective just because, uh, you've come so far and you can't just, take anything. But you guys have just been humble students and just extremely hungry and just sacrificing everything. Like, Chris, you know, I think the time you work with Mantic, I don't think you ever like really saw anything whatsoever from it. And I've never had like a comment whatsoever. Like I didn't either, but I think it was a journey we went together, but and there was no resistance or reluctance to that. You was just like, hey, I'm here to learn. And I think maybe that's actually my biggest takeaway from you guys, like from standing on the outside and once on the inside is I haven't met students like you yet. I think, yeah, Jace, you're incredibly talented, but I think if there's anything you have above else, it's that. It's that there you won't find the arrogance, you won't find the entitlement, you won't find the typical things you would associate to someone who's come far. And you've just stayed that really hungry student. Do you guys
Thank you.
see yourself as that still?
I do. I'm not
Absolutely.
gonna hide it. I know I through the amount of artists and A&Rs and managers and executives we've met along the way, the people who Chris and I get along with the best are always the people who are just open, have a similar understanding of like the Wild West nature of music and how so much of it's trial and error. Even in fact, I think that's actually what executives think. Like that's what makes them good executives is the understanding that it is trial and error. There is no rule book. Like we have music books to inform us of how to try our best guesses, but it is still so much guesses. And like I think, there's like a famous quote someone did that like The second you stop learning is the second you stop growing. And like I don't know, I think I I I know that what Chris and I want to do is not about achieving one big goal. We're not trying to climb a mountain. We're trying to be mountain climbers. You know? It's not like we're trying to get to the top of one mountain. It's like, no, we are going to be climbing mountains forever because we love climbing mountains. We're not doing this to tell everyone we got to the top of Everest. Everest is just part of what we do.
Mhm.
And that like is so much more exciting. It's so
Mm,
much easier to get through droughts, to get through dry spells, to get through like corporate BS
mhm,
if we know that like we're not doing this because we want to make a lot of money off of one label. We're doing this because we love doing music. We love this stuff. And
mhm,
we believe art is incredibly important. And if we believe art is incredibly important, we believe that people in music, people in art need to view it as important, act about it like it's important. And I think that's encouraged me to just stay as humble as I can, as excited as I can, because it's bigger than making songs, I think.
mhm,
And
mhm,
being a small person, a part of a big machine, I think helps the machine work a little better, be a little better. And that's
mhm,
exciting. That's so much more fulfilling than trying to get something.
mhm,
And I'll say on that, Jace makes my job so easy because he's always a student and he's always looking to become better. And like, there's plenty of times situations have happened where if I was him, I probably would have thrown the towel and said, "No, I'm not doing that." But no matter what, he always like, even if he doesn't want to, he'll be like, "Ah, all right, no, I got to do it. I got to finish this." And that makes I can't explain to you how easy that makes everything I do because instead of me having to beg him to do something, he just does it. And like it just makes everything it's just kind of a like the core, I think the core of our whole thing is just giving our best, as cheesy as that sounds. And that's all you can do. You can give your best. You can't guarantee your record's gonna do well. You can't guarantee anything, but if you give your best and it doesn't do well, at least you can know, you know what, we
mhm,
did everything we can, as opposed to
mhm,
being like, we kind of skipped all these corners, could have been better. Like, I think that's probably where Jace's drive comes from, is he never wants to hear back a record and be like, I got lazy there. Like,
mhm.
he'll tinker with anything for hours until it's just right, and it just shows, and it's
Yeah.
beautiful to see from the outside.
Masterpieces only.
Mm.
Masterpieces only,
Amazing.
That's
baby.
the rule.
But I have a question. You know, there's the we can call it obvious struggle, but the other struggle of being an artist trying to make it. You know, of not making money and needing to do side jobs and being constantly poor. And I think that's interesting itself, but but that's not where I want to go. So you guys, I know there's other hardships than just getting food on the table. Could we spend some time sort of understanding, as a creator in LA and as a representative in LA, what are the other struggles and hardships you guys need to navigate beyond just the struggle itself?
Oh, this is gonna take up so much time. I love this question. I well, to start with, a problem that I kept on running into was caring more as a producer, caring more about the songs than the artist. And I'm sure that there are people out there who are gonna feel offended by that. I'm sorry, but the truth hurts. But the, but what I mean what I mean that what I mean is that, like, I care so much about the songs I do. I really do, and I'm really trying not to just see the song when we're making it, because I don't think that's a good producer. I think a good producer sees the whole vision from the conception of writing it all the way to it on stage, and along the way, there's so much that goes down to, like, the colors inside of the promo and the photos used and what your video says and who you work with and like the story and the air that is like built around your artistry with this song. Like, it is heartbreaking to have such a clear vision and to try and communicate that with someone who just doesn't get it and doesn't really care as much. because like I'm going to give absolutely everything to your songs. Like that's kind of the guarantee I give people is I'm going to care so much. This will matter to me like it's my child. And to not receive that back sucks. Like I've called Chris more times than I can count. Just like just just frustrated over my head and with emotions about like how little people care about something I care so much about, and it's not even my project, you know? Chris, what do you think?
That's obviously a huge one, a massive one that I feel like is more common than I would have thought. Um, but it's interesting, having done the band thing for a long time and producing, like I see so many blind spots I had, like glaringly obvious ones where I'm like, how did I not see that? But now on this side, I see it happening all the time, and I get it because I feel like when you're an artist, and I was never a full artist, but when you're an artist, like it is so much work, like to be an artist. And then one word we always come to is like intention. Like, what's the intention of this? Like,
Mm.
are you being an artist because you feel like you're being drawn to say something? Are you being an artist because you want to be TikTok famous? Are you being an artist, And there's not one wrong answer, but depending on the answer, it kind of changes, our approach to it. And I think what Jason and I we've gone through so many sessions to now. I think we prefer to do sessions that we like believe in and that we support, and that the artist gives as much as Jace. Because a lot of times, Jace will stay in the studio until sometimes 10, 11 at night, and they start at 11 in the day
Well, try
in the
3
morning,
a.m., man.
3 a.m. And then like it's just incredible. And it's when that drive is met with an artist with the same drive, I feel like that's when it's like, ooh, this is like hard to find that. But when we find that, that's when we really latch on to projects, because we're like, yes, like we see the same way. But yeah, that's a huge struggle is what Jay said about getting people to care as much about it as we do.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting in sort of my studies into entrepreneurship and music, full disclosure, like my dream was music. And I just found out it wasn't for me, like in the traditional sense that you guys are pursuing music. We can break that. I've broken that down many times on the podcast, but where I see myself very similar with you guys is that the mountain climbing itself, like, is the goal. And personally, I see myself as sort of a in between Chris and Jace. Like I'm also extremely obsessive, but I don't obsess over the product as much. I obsess over the learning, if that makes sense. And what I see in entrepreneurship, and what you also talk with artistry, is that I'm also very dumbfounded about like the founders and entrepreneurs trying to go into this without the drive that Jace is describing.
Yeah.
Because I think besides talent, which is obvious, it needs to be undeniable in most people that succeed, it is just the resilience, really, like in the work ethic and the dedication, obsession that gets you somewhere. And it seems so obvious and platonic when you say it. Like when you live it, it kind of gets to understand what that actually means. Like for me personally, like, sometimes obsessing about something so much that, I would never get paid for, and getting like 3 hours of sleep, getting up with 3 kids in the morning, and like feeling absolutely fucking terrible in the morning. Like I can't get out of bed. And then like 1 hour later, I'm so ready to work. Like, and not because no one's ever going to pay me to do that, but it's just the pure obsession of the craft
Yeah.
and the journey. And I think people miss that completely when they're out on their artist journey, like how important that aspect is. And honestly, that's my biggest tell if someone's going to make it. Just like, do they have that or not? And obviously, you can get it over time through some sort of revelation, but most of the times it's sort of like, that's just something you just need to look for. If they're
Right.
that, the chances of them succeeding is probably going to be 10x higher, because the rest just seems a tiny bit random.
And I feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
to understand that X factor about it, like you had to have been an artist. Like, so I'm so grateful for having tried the artist thing for so long, because otherwise, if I was just a suit and tie, I would just be like, I don't know. Like, yeah, it sounds good, you know, but it's like there's so much more to it than that. And then to add on to one thing, Jacob, about like struggles and stuff, one thing that we find quite common, and I get it, is like just like getting into the game.
Oh,
Um,
completely.
I feel like, you know,
Just
and
even getting into the room or the conversation of the room.
it's so
So
many,
difficult.
and it's not even like I'm not like snarky about it. It's just like I get it, because if you're an artist with success and you have your team and you guys do great together, I do understand the hesitation of being like, oh yeah, let's bring in a new writer or a new producer. And so on one hand, I do get it. On the other hand, it's frustrating because it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Everyone's like, oh, you need that one song, changes everything. It's like, I agree. So, but it seems like to get that one song, it has to be like you kind of breaking an artist, because it's really going to be hard to get in the room with the artist you want to get into when you don't have the resume. And I feel like one frustration I experience a lot is people solely listening with their eyes and not their ears. And I think that's like such a common thing now, where it's like I don't have to play the music and you're gonna have your mind made up usually before I even play you anything based on what you're reading in front of you. And that's
Dude,
just been like so frustrating. But you gotta keep going, because sometimes we'll let it get us down, then it's like, right, this is doing nothing to help us. Put the blinders on, just keep going up ahead, you know, and something's gonna break.
yeah,
Yeah.
fair enough.
And, you know, I wouldn't be qualified to make that prediction, but I'm gonna make it anyways. Like, there's a few people that have been following the last few years that I know is gonna sort of make it, and you guys have made it in your own sense. But like, there's no indicator as of right now that the pursuit you guys are on and the amount of time and energy put into is not gonna, you know, continue giving you opportunities. And of course, life is always a mystery, and you wouldn't know for sure. But like, the chances is just getting better for you guys. But Jace, when you say, you're a mountain climber, like,
Yeah.
is there also a goal? Like, you know, of course, it's nice to have, like, rest on the mountain once in a while. Like, what are you looking for on a more, like, materialistic or success, way?
Well, Jacob, I I've I'm trying to find the best way to put this point. I Part of what I experienced in maybe some of the conflict I've had with artists that things didn't necessarily work out with was that, and you could boil the conflict down to, we had different perspectives of what art meant.
Yeah.
And my perspective is closer to the idea that art is something you live, not something you make. I believe that um I take a lot of inspiration from painters, and part of why I think they are so inspiring, if you are someone who eh, does something inside of entertainment that can be considered art. Part of what makes them so inspiring is that their entire lives were built around it. Like, the artistry was not in the paintings, it was in everything. Their homes are art. Their clothing is art. Oh, their hands are covered in this evidence of art. The entire thing is all this great work of art. And there was
Mm.
this movie made by Christopher Nolan a while ago called The Prestige, and one of the points made in The Prestige, because it's about magicians, right, and the art form of magic, is that, like, the greatest musician is someone whose, like, life lives and serves, like, the magic. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's a beautiful statement to make,
Mhm.
and, I believe that. I think it ties so much into the conversations that are being had right now inside of music culture about authenticity, about, like, finding ways to just put your real self out there, how to have high quality content, and then, like, relatable, like, low quality content that makes you feel very accessible. A lot of it is people want authenticity, and what I think, if you go even deeper into that, people want the art to be lived.
Mm.
I don't know if they consciously want it. I don't think there's a consumer out there saying, "Man, I can't wait to find an artist who lives it." But if you look at like the and this is really, really predominant in primarily female artists in the modern day. But if you look at like a Lana Del Rey and a Billie Eilish, and even to an extent a Maddie Healy, these are all examples of people inside of pop culture who have made their life very integrated with their art. And as a result, they are full expressions of living.
Mm.
So, how does this connect to your question about what my big goal is? What would even success mean to me? I I want my life to be this service of art. I've asked the question so many times, how do you become a person in your 50s, in 60s, in your 70s that is still in the rooms, that is still writing songs, that is still a part of like relevant art? Because inside of filmmaking, there are a lot of aging directors who are able to like use like their knowledge and their wisdom to continue to make incredible movies. But that's not necessarily the case in music. It's a rare case to have a Rick Rubin. It's a rare case to have Johnny Cash releasing music in his 70s and it's like doing stuff and it's relevant, it's important, it matters. It is rare. And so you got to ask the question like what does that? And I my big why, my big goal is I want to be a part of shaping what like Gen Z um, perceives art to be, what our great expression of art is, what our story is, and what our voice is. I think that like it comes about by people like me taking responsibility in that, seeing that there is a responsibility to take in that. That
Mm.
like our story, if not intentionally written, will write itself. And I don't want it to write itself.
Mm.
Because when it writes itself, it's written by others. It's written externally, and I don't want that. I think that that's not who we are. That's not what this current young generation is. And I do not want the outside world to write who we are. I want us to do that. I believe
Mm.
art is always been the way that humanity writes its story. When we
Mm.
look at pieces of history, we are remembered through works of art, through
Okay.
paintings, through pictures, through I mean, pictures to an extent, but through, like, paintings and through works of art is how we are remembered, is how our story is told. I
Mm.
believe I can be a part of that. I believe I have what it takes, and therefore, like, I every day I have to wake up and be a part of that. 'Cause
Yeah.
I think it's greater than just making songs, it's greater than the Billboard, it's greater than pop music, and it goes into, like, who are we and what is our story? Are we gonna be are we gonna be known as the, like, ADHD generation that just gave into brain rot, or are we going to be way more than that? Because I view Gen Zs and I view my culture and my people as way more than that.
Mm.
I see so much meaning, so much compassion, I see so much empathy, I see so much um I see so much purpose inside of the conversations of the youth of today, and I believe that they deserve, like, young artists who integrate it into their lives, who completely live it, who completely embody it, and give their everything, and shape what the next face of art is. I wanna be a
Mm.
part of that. That's my
Mm.
big goal. That's my big why.
And
It's
I think on that, one thing that I really try to make as one of my, like, main jobs is to, whenever I'm able to kinda, without sounding like a martyr, like, shield Jace from a lot of, like, the BS that goes on within the industry. Like, if I'm having a conversation with a lawyer or a label or manager or whatever, and it's, like, not a great conversation, I'm probably not gonna go relay it to Jace, because then that's how I think it's so easy to become cynical and become so, kind of jaded, and now
completely.
whatever was fun in music is now gone, because now you have to go in the room with this guy who, the manager is trying to screw you. You know what I mean? Like, I
Mm.
just try to shield him away from all of that. And like, my goal is to keep his innocence and just his love of music intact for as long as possible. Like, sometimes I'll treat myself and join a session, just sit there, and like, it's so fun to watch because he's in his producer seat, like jumping up and down, and like almost every time. when an artist has a first session with Jace, they leave and they're like, dude, I wish I can love music as much as this guy. And there's something so special about that, because there are some artists I've worked with and they've said, like, they'll have a session with Jason and they'll be like, oh, wow, I kind of forgot that music could be fun again, because I guess when you get to a certain place, whether it's success or you bored, like, it's not really exciting. It's just a job. And I think that's kind of when phoning in music happens, and it's kind of like, oh, man, that's so lazy. Like, come on. So I think just keeping it where Jace can just live in his creative world and not having to worry about all the
Oh
BS
yeah.
that comes with it.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
Chris is instrumental in creating the world in which I'm even capable of going after something like that.
Because and I
Because
will
because without him, I would be there would be too much reality inside of my working to create the invisible.
and when we work with artists that don't have a team around them, I have like so much respect for them, because it's like, damn, I don't know how you can juggle all that. Like, that's impressive. So yeah, I think it's important to be surrounded with people that are able to shield you, not make you like super ignorant and arrogant, but just shield you from things you don't need to maybe know.
Mhm. Mhm. I think it's so interesting to draw parallels to entrepreneurship, and I do see myself, whatever that means, like in between you two guys. But I consider myself still an artist, not from music perspective, but from a creator storytelling perspective. And my biggest struggle has been because I've been in between and often been the initiator of like the business side of it. I need to be both Chris and Jace, and like maybe closer to the artist you're referring to, Chris. And that's just been incredibly difficult, like to navigate the space of knowing that I care more than everyone else, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay longer than everyone else, and the emotional investment that takes, but then also being confronted with the bullshit on the other end, which that's been sort of my journey. Um,
Yeah.
and what I love about you guys' story is that oftentimes the long term success comes from uh, the lack of balance, if that makes sense. Like being allowed to be, the crazy person in the room.
Oh yeah.
Um, and I think that this is where is so difficult, because the reality of music is that you need to have both things to work. And more so, you actually need the business to work really, really well, because the general basis for having good finances is almost not there.
Yeah.
So that's the most difficult thing to navigate as a creator in this space, is that you need both, but you
Yeah.
cannot be both. And finding the person like you, Chris, is difficult. I just had an episode with Mike Holland, which is the manager of Logic, and also hearing how that was just instrumental in them having a good career, of like having that extreme obsession, but then also having that stable side. But Mike is still artistic, sort of video creation. That's his thing. So there's this sort of bridge. And I think that's really interesting, seeing your dynamic. And I also believe that's why and how it's going to work over time, is that you need a bit of both, but you also especially need the person who's executing to have that mind space to be that. But it's really difficult, if not impossible, to do it alone.
Yeah, it's really hard, we found, and it is also like when you work with artists and maybe the team isn't as aligned with their goals, or what the artist wants. It makes it tough for the artists, and like,
Mm.
because I see, for I hear both sides, obviously the artist side and the team side, and sometimes, yeah, it is hard to find that perfect balance of like the synergies there, the goals are there, everyone's working towards the same thing, but it's a game changer when you do find it.
Mm. So what is the next steps, like in a concrete, practical when it comes to sort of career progression, if that even is a thing you talk about? Like, Chris, what is the talks you guys have for taking this further?
So I think like a year ago or something, me, Taylor, I said my partner, it's also my wife. I should have said that in the beginning.
I
Me,
mean,
my
partner in
wife,
all senses.
and Jace, we started this company, and it kind of came about just being like, okay, we wish, um, we had this set up for us. And I feel like do you listen to Founders Podcast, Jacob? Have you heard of that?
Hmm?
Have you heard of the
You can't talk
podcast
about other
Founders?
podcasts on the
Yeah, of course.
podcast,
No,
Chris.
maybe not that specific one, though.
I love it. But anyways, he just talks about founders and stuff, and there's always these through lines I see on everything else. Like I feel like all the best founders started by just trying to solve a problem that they hadn't been solved yet. And I think so for the future for us, what we did a year ago, we kind of started this company that's like a label publisher. It's kind of like the new take on the music industry, right? Like I feel like so many new companies now, it's like a music tech startup where it's like, hey, we're partners. We're not going to do a typical label 360 deal. It's just a different structure. So we've been really chipping away at this and trying to figure how to make the most sense and be artist centric. Such a taboo word. Be artist centric while also, being able to be sustainable. So we've been working on that a lot. So next year we have a release for our first artist we've been working with for like a year, and we're just trying to put everything in place because also being on this side of it, I'll see so many times when a release happens, like I'm always a little surprised at sometimes the lack of preparation for it, or like things aren't registered, or there's no promo, or this or that, and it's like from the outside it's like, oh well, these are obvious reasons why maybe your song didn't do as good as it could have. So I've just been taking all these notes over the past few years and just trying to roll it into this company where like, okay, we want to do the things that we think needs to be done. So that's been a really big undertaking, and also while balancing his own producing writing career at the same time. But they're kind of working hand in hand, which is really interesting because now a lot of
Yeah, that was
artists,
intentional to make it all work hand in hand. It's all to make it all point in the same direction.
because now like when there's artists that we really believe in, but maybe the budget isn't there, or whatever it is, if we really like it, it's like now we can be really involved as opposed to just facilitating sessions, which is still fun. I still love it, but like it's fun to be part of something you believe in. I mean, as I think everyone would agree with. So that's really
Completely.
cool that we've been working on. Jace, what about
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. The company's called Lightwork. And, after my whole spiel about art and wanting to make a difference or whatever, the follow through to that is like, how do we create the environment, the subculture necessary for there to be a cultural shift? And I talked with Chris about this all the time about a year ago. It was the whole thing. My most said word last year was probably culture. Probably. And I believe that in allowing artists the space or the opportunities to to be able to make their life works of art, to be able to dream bigger than they've ever dreamed, try the most ambitious thing, like the environment around them, as we've learned together, like the environment around them has to facilitate that too. And so you can't expect someone to go out and make the best work of art if they are also not being looked after inside of these back end business deals. You do need people to have your back in that sense. And so I believe what Lightwork is what it will continue to be, and the reason why it was made was to give, artists, I don't wanna use the word home, it's overused, it's abused, but, to give artists like, that place, that environment to make their most ambitious thing, and to not have it tweaked to be the most commercially friendly thing. I really wanna see what the world looks like when the people who create are sharing their unadulterated creation, are sharing their untapped with creation, their most obscure views on the world. That has to happen. That has to happen.
Mm.
We do not have a full understanding about who we are as people in the modern day if even our, like, works of art are tampered with, and so
Mm.
I believe that that's a very important part of, like, a company like this,
Mm.
of being able to, like, let people have this outlet, because I know there are a lot of people inside of music, in massive places and even in tiny places that, like, know what their greater, uh, calling is, know what their greater purpose is, and are experiencing, like, these massive corporations, like, just saying no to these purposes of theirs. And
Mm.
I think that I want to be a part of the people. I want to provide a complete one-stop shop channel to just say yes to the most obscure, obscene ideas. And, like, through that, for example, as a little teaser, like, I've been working with this one artist named Tom Sless. We made this song called American Turbo, which is the most out there song ever. It is the most said yes to every crazy idea song, I think, ever. And as a result, it created this massive statement about the modern, like, American political sphere as someone who, like, as this artist Tom, is someone who, like, is on tour 100% of his year, like, in a
Mm.
van and in cities all over the country, meeting people, talking to people, understanding what America even is. And that's how it was made. And there's no, like, other vehicle, I believe, inside of music right now that has the same kind of encouragement and excitement towards people to do that.
Mm.
I think we had to make it, and
Mm.
that's the current thing that I believe will be taking up the majority of our time moving forward, because I want it to be the thing that takes up the majority of our time moving
Mm.
forward.
And one thing that's been
I have a
interesting.
project that's gonna be released through it. We have a country artist. We have an incredible British pop star. We have a lot of people coming into this already, Chris.
What I found has been interesting is when we're talking to artists about this model. I feel like the old record label model is still romanticized to an extent, and I found that so interesting because when I sit down and break down like what a typical major label deal looks like, it's usually super unadvantageous for the artists in regards to them owning their copyrights and them owning publishing and stuff. And so when we present our business model to people, sometimes like they're taken aback just because it's not like a typical label deal. So it's gonna be interesting seeing how I feel like the music industry is shifting a lot more towards being artist focused deals. Because the Megan Thee Stallion one, they gave her her own label, I think, right? And that she'd sign people underneath. It was some big deal, and like I think now labels are realizing, right? So these artists want to have, keep something, and they want to stop getting screwed. So we're trying to get into that
Mm.
landscape.
What I think is one of the most interesting reflections upon this talk, and this is sort of going to be my last comment, is sort of what you're touching upon now. But I'll sort of say it in my own ways. There's like three big learnings I've had the last year when it comes to artistry and entrepreneurship. One is that there needs to be either a full story or person or people who are able to tell the full story over time. Like that, you know, I'm just gonna care about the music, not the visuals. As you sort of referred to, Judas Abner, it doesn't exist in what it needs to have. And the other thing is that, the lack of a better word, you need the X factor. And it's just undeniable. And in my career, I've tried to deny that many times. And in all honesty, I've just lost all my money and time and energy on trying to pursue that. It's just the reality of it. But the third thing is that X factor can either be there from the start, but can also through partnerships take place in a common vision. So and I think that's my biggest learning. The intricate thing is like, yes, it needs to be there, and it needs to be the full story. but it can either take place in one person, and in my opinion, you a person where, at least on the creative side, it takes place in one person. But in many cases, including my own, I only function well in a setting where that can unleash who I want to become and what story to tell. And I think maybe that's also what you guys are referring to, is like, for those people that has the thing but needs the full attention of catering that, is where it needs a home. And I think a lot of founders, a lot of musicians miss those perspectives. And that's sort of what I take from this poll. Jason and Chris, thank you so much, and I'm going to follow your careers for years to come, and I've been very blessed to sort of follow on the sidelines, and I'm starting to see now. I'm 31, and I've been a part of way too many creative careers because I'm also obsessive, oftentimes to my own loss, and I've now seen over the many years who are starting to make it, who have made it, and who definitely didn't make it, and there's common denominators, basically to the thought I said, and just keep doing what you guys do. Like, I think it's really rare. Just just we give each space to full self. So thank you for that, and I hope more people know future talk.
Also, real quick, I also want to say thank you to you, Jacob. I never thought I'd be on the business side of music at all, and it was just that one session, meeting you, getting the beer, just kind of being like, oh, I can still be in music without like creating music. That definitely shifted me, and also like you suggesting to manage Jace. Like, I feel like, I don't know if you saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, or it was just like, I don't know, try it. But either way, it really like was a pivotal moment in my career. So I appreciate you giving me the time and attention to kind of believe in me when I didn't really know this is something I would do. So big thank you to you.
Oh, I second that. Huge thank you, Jacob.
Reese, well, I'll see you in the podcast in a couple of years, and then get us
Hell
understand
yeah.
what's happening.
Hell yeah.
Hey guys, we'll talk soon.
All right, see you, man.
Thank you.